Welcome to another conversation with the Apostate Sisters. I'm Patty, and I make this podcast with my sister Nancy. We grew up in a doomsday cult called the Worldwide Church of God. We're also nerdy about history and culture, but critical of religion. So get ready to get mad or to nod your head in agreement as we continue our series on the life and influences of one Herbert W. Armstrong. Last time, we trace the religious origins of Saturday as the Sabbath day, a core tenet of old Herbie's that he used to proclaim his church to be the only true church. We also found out about the early years of his career where he built skills at advertising, figuring out what would make people buy, what would make them sign their name on the dotted line. On with the show.
It's funny. Our first episode is titled Bourbon and Spectacles. And even though I am in Louisville, Kentucky, home of some of the best bourbon distilleries in the world, we ran out. So, screwdriver today.
Hey,
Awesome.
screwdrivers and spectacles actually sounds better. So, score.
That works for me.
Uh-huh.
Yes. Whenever we're dissecting heavy topics like this. And Pats, I had no idea we were going to get such a reaction to our first video the way that we did.
Right?
Um,
Well, because you put together that really effing cool montage.
yeah, we should definitely reiterate why we're doing this. Our parents are still under the thumb of Armstrongism, as are so many other people. And those are the people that we want to reach out to. And a lot of people have. Our parents are still trapped. There's a lot of other people that are still trapped in this religious ideology that cannot be summed up in just a sentence or two. We
Right.
have to dissect it. We have to create these videos to try to understand who our parents were. We really knew nothing about them other than they emulated Herbert W. Armstrong, the founder of Worldwide Church of God. There was no one they emulated more than Herbert
Right.
W. Armstrong. And I
Yeah.
feel like the best way to understand our parents and their thought process is to understand the man himself, understand how he built this religious empire. And so that's exactly what we're doing. But in the process, we are bringing out of the woodworks a lot of people who may still be traumatized from his really scary teachings, people that might even still be trapped and feel like they have no one to talk to about it.
Yep.
And we are here for those people. We're here for, to kind of share our own story and see who can maybe relate to it. And a lot was very positive. We even had some hate comments. And so that makes me happy because I was always told, if you're not pissing somebody off, you're not being bold enough. And I know that that's a hard concept, a hard pill to swallow, because it is scary to put our voices out there. It is scary to try to come out of something that controlled you. Here, my sister Patty and I are in our 40s now. Okay, we've only just kind of started reaching out about this topic where we felt like we were ready. Okay, and the reason we are getting the negative response is because there are people out there that are going to try to control you. They're going to try to shut your voice up. And I just want to tell you, you are not alone in that. And one of the tactics that they use is to try to tear down your intellect, try to make you feel
Oh my
like you
God.
are stupid.
It is what they do. So people are either still trapped in the actual splinter groups, like the actual
Right.
churches that still exist that were based on Armstrongism. However, I think there's a big contingent of people who have been out of those churches for quite some time and like filtered their way into other various mainstream churches, especially I think some of the high control evangelical churches, from some of
Mm-hmm.
the people that I've been talking to coming to find our content. I think a lot of people didn't realize just how different Armstrongist churches were. They thought,
Right.
oh, I'm just in a slightly different church, right? So I've even heard from some people talking about their experiences going to an evangelical church where they kind of got pulled aside and were like, what are you saying? What are you doing? Because they had some conditioning that was coming out and was aberrant even for an evangelical church. So what I think, all of that to say is that we're connecting with other people who are former Worldwide Church of God members, and we're actually forming a little bit of a network so that we
Hmm.
can catch them a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Because there's us where we've been out of church things and we are atheists. And so there's
Yeah.
going to be some people in that range or people that are resonating with our irreverency, right? Because I think being irreverent is absolutely a part of the kind of therapeutic effort that we're undertaking for ourselves and to, lift up others here.
Everyone has a story to tell. Everyone has potential. Everyone has passions, traumas that they need to get over. People that will support you and not tear you down. Maybe you can have even some healthy debates at some point if you have questions about things, but definitely not conservative people that are just going to tear it out of you, bring you
Right.
down.
So, like, yes, we're atheists and we're more irreverent, but we're connected and kind with people who are still Christian, people who are just
Mhm.
barely coming out of the church.
Yeah.
And so we need to have the softness to speak our truth and be here for the people who resonate with what our message is, but also be able to receive people who aren't quite ready for the uh, brashness of the way we're approaching it. But
Right.
we can help be a conduit and connect those people with someone who will be the right place for them to land right now as they start to unpack and heal.
Figure it's a good time for us to mention that a new series of ours is coming out.
Well, so yeah, we're starting to do some practices to get ready to do a new series that is based on, well, I don't know. Some of you from were kids in the 80s might remember the Book It program. If you remember, you needed to read a certain amount every night. And when you filled out a form, you could take it to Pizza Hut and get yourself a free personal pizza. Anyway, so that Book It program, I'm co-opting a little bit, and we're going to read. So between the two of us and our friend Joel, who has a channel called Mr. Difficult, where he also makes Worldwide Church of God content, we are going to together sit down and read through some of the cult literature that shaped us. It was, the stacks of books that our parents lived by. We're going to read through and dissect them. And because we are who we are, we couldn't just start with, United States and Britain and prophecy. Fuck no. Oh, we're starting with Herbert W. Armstrong's The Missing
Missing
Dimension in
dimensions
Sex.
of sex. Herbert W. Armstrong wrote a sex book, and that is going to be the first one that we talk about. So we are going to have some fun on this channel too, because we need to. It's heavy
Yeah,
stuff that we are unpacking. Get it? You
exactly.
out there?
Joel, Mr. Difficult, who's joining us for that, not only is he still a Christian, so that's going to add an extra layer to how we go about this, but he also speaks Mandarin and has studied Greek and Hebrew. So I mean, he brings like quite a lot of world and language knowledge to the party, which is kind of perfect if we're going to go through a book.
How you say thank you in Mandarin is 谢谢. How you say it in Cantonese is good.
If you are just someone that wants to get your story out, maybe you were raised in this organization or other organizations, please do reach out if you want us to either tell your story. You don't have to be on camera, but we definitely want to know what's going on. For those of you that were in the Worldwide Church of God and have maybe gotten out of it or just wanted to talk to someone from kind of like a psychological standpoint of things that you might be having going on in your life that you didn't even realize were kind of connected with the church. I did find what looks like a really good channel on YouTube. It's called Life After Religion, Cult Recovery, and it is Dan Clark and his wife Angela Clark. You can find them on YouTube. They are former Worldwide Church of God members, or at least I know Angela is. And she
Cool.
also has a book out there called Awakening from Unconscious Resentment. I have not read it yet. I only recently came across it, but it looks like something that might be worth checking out.
Awakening from Unconscious Resentment?
Yes. Isn't that
Holy
a beautiful title?
that phrase, unconscious resentment, explains like, whoa.
She's a great
Okay.
speaker too. I've seen some of their channels,
Amazing.
so shout out to them.
Yeah.
They look like really good people who care about connecting with others in the same situation. They do talk about Jehovah's Witnesses a little bit too, so maybe that was something that Dan was involved with. Um, so check them out. Also, if you're just wanting to look into deconstruction and questioning your faith, um, there are other sources you can go to, like Recovery from Religion is also a really good organization. If you see violations of the separation of religion and government, you can go to Freedom from Religion Foundation, based out of Madison, Wisconsin. They also take care of things like that. Again, just don't let people shut your voice down. If you have questions, there are places that you can go. All right. Do not get sucked into um, do not get pushed into those little corners with certain people trying to shut you up. Those are the tactics that they use. So
Preach, Nancy.
preach. Yes. Well, and I thought it was funny. One of our, more hateful comments that we got on the last video talked about, yeah, you girls are far from being theologians. And the first thing that went through my mind was, fuck yeah, we're not theologians and we're not claiming to be. We explained our reasonings for doing this, and the thought that what I was thinking was, I can't imagine a worse fate than having an actual career where you read and study the Bible for a living. Yeah, it
Trying to
was
make
boring enough
something
the
real
first
out of
time.
things that are definitely not real. What? Hi.
I've read it and it
No.
was boring enough the first time. No, no, thank you. I'd rather stick my head in a toilet and drink toilet water. Fuck all the way off. But this is what people try to do, Pats. Again, I just wanted everyone to know, people who try to shut you up and try to have power and control over you, they try to make you feel like you're stupid and don't know what the fuck you're talking about, even though you do have a voice. And actually, you're the people that everyone should be listening to. Okay? Yes.
Yes.
We want to hear your voices. Do not let people shut you up. We do not want to keep hearing from these people, okay? You guys are the ones we want to hear from. Yes. Us little people on the
But
bottom.
even the hateful comments are coming out of a place of extremely traumatized people, right? They are not
Right.
bad people. And that's the hardest part, because when they're coming at you, it's really hard not to feel that way about it. But everyone, even the parents that indoctrinated children in this situation, they were all indoctrinated themselves and abused themselves. So they are as much a victim of their own, what was that word you said earlier?
Unconscious resentment.
Unconscious resentment.
A title like that, fuck yeah, that Angela Clark
Yeah.
sounds amazing. I would like to
Yes,
connect with her. And so
totally.
I just wanted to put her book out there. A title like that, I don't think you can go wrong.
But
So,
doesn't that title explain the like more negative or attacking comments that we get?
yes,
It's
it does. Yeah.
unconscious resentment, because they just think they're right, and it like bothers them so much to have that questioned, because literally like their eternal life is sort of hung in the balance based on this thing they believe. Right? So
Exactly.
no
Yes.
wonder it cuts so deep when they see someone challenging it in a way that is probably hitting some nerves, you know?
Yes. And I've always thought, if you really truly do believe in something, if somebody else questions it, why would that bother you? Just have an intelligent conversation back and forth. But usually when people know kind of deep down, I don't know if that's in their subconscious, they know that they're really actually wrong and they're not really convinced. Yes, they will attack in anger.
Yeah,
That
because
tends to happen.
deep
So
down, they know they don't have proof of it. Well, you want to start up this bitch?
yeah.
Not calling you one, calling the situation.
That's okay. I don't take offense to things like that.
You
I'm
know, I've been
confident and
trying to
thick
take back the
skinned.
word bitch. I said this once before. I've been trying to.
Yes.
I've been trying to like use it casually, like like,
No.
hey girl. Yeah, it doesn't work. It just feels wrong. Not emotionally there yet.
Words hold power. Yes. Oh, speaking of words, I have a fun little fact before we get back into the timeline. Herbert W. Armstrong, they always include the W when they talk about him. That's not a middle name, apparently. He doesn't have a middle name. I tried to find it. W was just added so that he could distinguish himself from other Herbert Armstrongs, which I guess there were a whole bunch. He even had one living across the street from him in Pasadena, California. But I think um
So it's
the
just
middle
W.
name,
It's just like,
It's just W.
just W
Like
for no
apparently
reason.
Harry S. Truman, the S doesn't really stand for anything either. So I think that was maybe something that had occurred around the time. I don't even know when middle names started. Maybe it was like 1700s, but
They
I
weren't
think it
a
was
hundred
either.
percent.
Hmm?
Like it wasn't that 100% of people did it though for a long
No, it was the wealthy. It
time.
was the wealthy. When you had a middle name, all of a sudden you were more, I guess, elect or whatever you want to fucking call. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting. I never really knew what the W was in his name and what the fuck, it's not even a word. Okay. Anyway, getting back to the timeline. For anyone who has not seen the first video, I recommend going ahead and watching it. That is Bourbon and Spectacles. That is part one of our series on Herbert W. Armstrong and his life, his timeline that I put together. So where we left off was around 1933 when his church was sort of not renamed, but it was founded as Radio Church of God, and it would go on to be Radio Church of God quite a long time. Um, Herbert W. Armstrong was being listened to over the radio. That's how he got his early roots started, therefore, hence the name. He talked about second coming of Jesus, and people started listening to him. He started getting a following and was like, okay, well, people want to go to church someplace, like physically. And so the
Um,
organization grew. People were listening to his words.
just gonna say, I think this speaks to the fact that prior to the 1930s, like church going wasn't this like very American thing to do. It wasn't like everyone just went to church, I don't think.
Really?
I actually, yeah, I think prior to like the Azusa tent revivals and things like that of the 1930s, I kind of think that the US was a little bit lower on the whole Christian thing. Because we didn't
Maybe.
put things like in God we trust on our money until the 50s.
Oh,
So, I
that's
mean, there was
true.
definitely like this surge at some point. I don't know. Maybe that's neither here nor there, but I just think he was stepping into something that was like already a fully growing thing within American culture at the time.
Yeah, and he started talking about things that were very different from other people, and so
Mhm.
he stood out. I guess that was founded in Eugene, Oregon. That was until about 1938, but it's like the name was still around for nearly, I want to say 20 years. It was
Hmm.
Radio Church of God. It was Radio Church of God for a long time.
Yeah.
And I finally came across someone who was actually raised in the Radio Church of God before it was worldwide. And he has
Whoa.
a book series out here. I haven't read it yet. I, again, just came across it, but I wanted to mention it for anyone else who would be interested. The author's name is James Allen Anderson. I went on his website, and the series is called The Threefold Chord. So look up threefoldchordseries.com. I know there are 4 published books at the moment. A 5th is on its way. And it's a novel, much in the same way that I wrote a book kind of for therapy. It's a novel. It doesn't really pertain to the church, but it shows kind of, the aftermath, the effects of the church. And in this one, it sounds like these novels are really touching on a lot of things that he dealt with as a kid, a lot of physical and psychological abuse. So trigger warning.
Mhm.
That might be something worth checking out for anyone who is interested. And
Yeah.
again, it's somebody we'd like to connect with at some point too. Um,
Yeah.
so during this time, Armstrong was also on a local radio channel, KORE. We talked about that last time. He ended up getting a half-hour slot. And so he just continued to be known as this televangelist. And
Televangelist, like before television was a thing.
I know.
He couldn't have been the only radio preacher, though. I mean, I feel like that had to have been a thing.
No, they were still more out there. But again, this was before the television was even invented. So, or I don't know, when the fuck did the television come out? There was like an early version in the 20s, I want to say. But Armstrong was on that. He knew media, he knew how to
Mhm.
take advantage of reaching out to a platform that was massive. He was so good at it.
Thankfully, he never got
So,
his hands on social media.
oh my fucking, well, his followers, his current followers still do.
Well, in
We'll
this
talk about
country.
it.
Yeah. Okay, we'll get there.
Anyway, yeah, we'll get there. This is a It's a
All
lot of
right.
shit. All right. So also in 1934, the Plain Truth magazine came out for the first time. Is that the cringiest word, Pat? The Plain Truth magazine. I think he reached more of an audience through this magazine of his, maybe even than his program. It was
Agree with
everywhere.
that.
There were people in our comments even saying that they had found this in supermarkets or gas stations at some point. The Plain Truth magazine made it to so many different countries.
Well, it was
Into
free. People loved things that were
it was free. Yeah, and it kind of started around the time of the Great Depression. People were saving stuff. You never know if something is going to be of value at some point.
At
So this
least
was a
toilet
free monthly
paper.
magazine. Toilet paper. Oh, that brings me back to COVID days. Okay. So it was a free monthly magazine, much in the same way that the Seventh-day Adventists had their own magazine publication. Even today, it's like, I want to say one of the longest running monthly subscription magazines out there. Um, but he kind of started with some of his early teachings on things like British Israelism, which we'll talk about. Armstrong had a lot of very, I want to say, bizarre and very different teachings. There were things like prophecies about the end times or doomsday. Armstrong lived through 2 world wars, so I think his psyche was kind of like thinking about, well, we could all perish at some point anytime. And he saw probably all these devastating things when he was growing up and when he was a young man trying to navigate the world. 2 world wars were going on. So, of
Right.
course, this is what he's thinking about. Um,
Well, and I can say from looking at the beginning of one of his other books, The Missing Dimension in Sex, um, definitely talks about World War I and World War II and links just the idea that because of the way the world changed after each of those wars, like,
mhm,
oh, it's so bad now. Oh my gosh, everyone should be worried about this. But that's what he did with the plain truth. He got it out to people every month. He got it on newsstands in grocery stores, etc., all of these places. And what they did was they actually did share truth. I'm convinced that they did because they were exposing, in a way, real things that were scary in the world and
mhm.
doing it in a way where mainstream media, has a spin because mainstream media's job, I'm going to get a little conspiratorial here, but mainstream media's job is to make sure that the population keeps trucking along smoothly. People are going to work and school and doing their jobs and keeping up services. Like, make no
Right.
mistake, that is the media's job, but they also are trying to make money with clicks and everything. So they've got like this weird relationship with how they share
Yeah.
information with people through media. But he was like, fuck this. People are going to be like really glomming on to the idea that nuclear war is scary as hell. And so that's what I'm going to put on the front of my magazines. I mean, he was clickbait before we invented the term clickbait, right? Because he knew how to put things that were true and scary front and center, and then he could have his ideologies piggyback on it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
beautifully stated. That's exactly what he did.
and
You
he could
play on
hammer.
people's fears.
Well, right. And he
Nothing
could
drives a
hammer those
person.
ideas over and over and state it in, like, he'd have buzzwords, right? Which is a trick we still use, buzzwords to
Mhm.
make sure we knew what he was talking about, and then attach all of these things, all of these ideologies to it so that
Right.
people would hear it over and over and over. And then pretty soon you just
Start
associate
sticking.
those things. So,
Yes.
yes, he knew what he was doing. Like we said last time, it's just like Sesame Street. You repeat it enough times, it gets remembered.
Yes.
And it
And
gets taken as
nothing's,
truth. That's the thing. It's not that you just remember it and, oh, I heard that somewhere. It's like you
yes.
hear it enough times and in enough ways, it embeds itself and you just
Mhm.
take it as truth.
And nothing motivates a person more than playing on their fears. It's like
Yes.
when you go back to folklore and you tell children, don't go into the woods by yourself because there's an evil monster in here. You control the situation through fear. This is what Armstrong did.
Yep.
And
Through the
yes,
Plain Truth
you hit
magazine.
it. Sabbath on Saturday, we've really dissected. You can go see some of our earlier videos on that. No consumption of pork or shellfish, which we also talk about. No use of medical doctors. Divine healing only, which will be an episode all in itself. I don't think he ever changed his teachings on that one, even though there were many things that he changed his teachings on. I think he's stuck with that one. No celebration of pagan holidays. No Christmas, no birthdays, no Easter. No, we didn't have any of
Oh
that. Again,
no.
we do have a Christmas episode out there in audio format only. You can go check out. Keeping the holy days and festivals like Feast of Tabernacles, Feast of Trumpets, Day of Atonement, and all that. Again, we'll dissect those more later. No makeup on women, at least for a time. That may have changed at one point, right, Pats? We talked about that in our bodily autonomy episode. And there were all these weird restrictions on things like divorce and remarriage. They called it DNR. I don't know the exact
DNR,
logistics of
really?
that. DNR, yes, they actually, unfortunately, a lot of families did split apart because of things like his restrictions on divorce and remarriage. I don't know the exact details surrounding that, but it was something like if you got divorced and remarried, you had to divorce the person you were with and try to go back to the previous person that you were married to. Otherwise, you were living in sin. What the actual fuck right now? You
Well, but
serious?
you know what, though? When that was convenient to ignore that, they ignored that. Like, especially as time went by, because the new morality came in and everybody's up here getting divorces. But
Meanwhile, Armstrong did whatever the fuck he wanted.
it's just Henry VIII energy. It's fine. Not that they're like connected.
My husband and I did recently go see Bill Burr in concert. He's really funny. He's reached a certain age where now he's just kind of saying whatever he thinks because he gives no fucks anymore. He said once you reach a certain point in your life, you don't give any more fucks because what's the worst that's going to happen,
Yeah.
Oh, somebody's going to shut your voice down? So fucking what? Go
Well,
fuck yourselves.
that's I'm glad you've got the boldness about that. That's the part that's so hard for me still.
Really?
Feeling like, oh, yeah. I mean, I'm pushing through and I'm trying to say whatever the fuck I want to say, but I know that like the assembling of my like big ideas around it is thwarted by the fear still.
Fear, what's driving you to be afraid?
Of being told that I'm wrong or I don't know what the hell I'm talking about or like who do you think it's who do you think you are? That's the core of it is who do you think you are that people should listen to you out there. And that is totally the like demeaning and demoralizing that came through the church. And I think that falls
Right.
under the category of like the ways our parents were taught to take care of us was they were being told this was loving to your children, but in fact, it was hurtful.
Right.
Yeah. And destructive.
Yep. Okay, not long after the Plain Truth magazine came out, that was, let's see, 1939. Then we jump forward to a very significant date. December 1st, 1941. The US entered World War II. And again, we talked about how influential the world wars were to Armstrong. That was a mouthful. That's what she said. So World War II enters. We already discussed kind of the way that Armstrong was probably dealing with it, coping with this realization that, hey, life can end at any point in time. There was so much devastation in the world that maybe his trauma response was like, try to tell people to be prepared for the end of the world and all these horrific things that were going to happen. And dun dun dun, that same year, 1945, as far as I know, this was the first publication of his book titled The United States and Britain in Prophecy. And I
Mm-hmm.
do want to let everyone know that was not the original title of the book. It was originally titled You United States in Prophecy. Ooh, how convenient.
I mean, I think we need to recognize too that him having watched the two world wars happen and see how the US came out like sort of on top at the end of that because the US and well, just because the war itself had not the US, because the war itself had destroyed so much of Europe, just wrecked everything, blew it up,
Yeah.
turned it into rubble in so many ways, that it actually fueled the American economy because here the US was
Ooh.
ready to manufacture and help rebuild Europe. And so it kind of put the US on the map in a way it hadn't been before and really skyrocketed it to a world leadership position.
Right.
And so it played right in to his white English speakers thing because here he decided, apparently in what, 1939, um, this, his version of American exceptionalism coming through in this prophecy. But it's what he saw, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is what he saw because he saw the US kind of go from the Depression, World War, Depression, World War, and then he saw the rise of the middle class in the 1950s. And
Mm-hmm.
that, if you were white, was a very good thing in this country.
Yeah.
Right. And so he's, he wasn't operating in a vacuum. He's doing this in that context. So no fucking wonder. Like it fits.
It definitely fits, and it's not like we're excusing Armstrong's behavior here and kind of trying to get certain people to follow his church, but it makes sense that that's where he was coming from. Another thing I wanted to bring up with this book, I did read both, by the way.
Okay.
So I read The United States and Britain in Prophecy.
Mhm.
It was one of the most racist books I've ever read, by the way.
Really?
It was horrible. I'll give you
Well,
a few passages
I
from
know
this book.
I read the beginning once and it literally said, "It's not grace, it's race." What the hell?
Which brings me to something else here. Guess what? There is another book out there that was published first in 1902 by this Christian Zionist. His name was J.H. Allen, and the title of this book is Judah's Scepter and Joseph's Birthright. I read that one too. It is almost the exact same book as what Armstrong wrote in his United States and Britain and Prophecy.
What?
There's even a chapter in there that says grace versus race. Okay, let me read you some of the passages
Are we
from.
gonna
I'm
discover
dead
like
fucking
an
serious.
obscene like turtles all the way down of plagiarizing?
It was complete plagiarizing, and Herbert W. Armstrong appropriated shit like you wouldn't believe, Patty.
Can I read? Can I read?
Yeah, you can read them. Go for it. You see
Okay.
my passage? Okay.
Yep, I see your quotes. Okay. So this is from the 1902 book
Yeah.
that was
No,
plagiarized
these are
from?
from Armstrong's book.
This is from
I'm just
Armstrong.
saying that this 1902 book from J.H. Allen was almost exactly the same. Some of the
Okay.
chapters were even titled the same. So go for it.
Amazing. Okay, here we go.
It's horrible. All right.
I think this is what we need to bring out about Herbie,
Yes.
right?
Oh,
Like, we
shit.
don't need just what he said about himself. Like, the fact that you can show that he plagiarized and appropriated shit is exactly where we should go with this. Okay.
I know.
All right, how about some quotes from the United States and Britain in prophecy? On the world scene, nothing is so important right now as to know where the white English speaking peoples are identified in scores and hundreds of prophecies. Prophecies which describe vividly our sudden rise to national power and reveal the causes of that greatness. Right, it wasn't rebuilding Europe after World War II. It was God. It was God.
Mhm.
In the case of Great Britain, it is disintegrating even more rapidly than it developed. Britain has been almost overnight stripped of her colonies and her possessions, source of her wealth. Oh, it's how I feel about that. And reduced to a second-rate or third-rate power. So he's bemoaning the fact that Britain couldn't keep all of the land that they were like, we're just going to take this.
That they took.
That they took. That they
Mhm.
raided, that they took, that they boxed up and wrote fucking loot on the boxes and then went and put it in museums. Oh, it makes me so angry. I want all of the museums emptied and given back. Okay.
Yep. Can I
Hot
just
take.
point out too, I mean, I've said this before, my husband is from India, and obviously the British had occupied India for quite some time, the colonizers there. And I remember our mother making a comment that like, oh, the British colonizers were the best thing to ever happen to India. And yet the English came in there, took all their fucking gold and all those other resources, and then they left.
That was the best thing that happened. Okay.
That was the best thing to happen for the Indian people? Or for the British?
Or the people who took all the loot? Okay. All right. I'm going to have to calm myself for a second.
Sorry, it's all right.
I'm
When
so
you
pissed.
allow,
No, I'm so angry. I'm so angry.
I know you're angry,
Okay.
but guess what? When you allow other people to make you angry, they have control over you. So
I
just,
know.
I know.
Well, I don't even know who to be angry at. I mean, it's like hundreds of years ago,
You
old
can
white
be angry
people.
at the situation, Pat. It's
Yeah, I
perfectly
mean,
fine.
I am. It's okay. I'll be okay, but I just needed a minute to like,
Injustice makes us angry, and that's
yes,
okay.
that I wonder. It's not just ex-culties, obviously, but I do think us ex-culties have like a very strong sense of injustice. Okay, I'm going
Yeah.
to read the next one. Ready?
Go for it.
Okay. A birthright is something which is one's right by birth. It has nothing to do with grace, which is unmerited pardon, and a free gift, which is not one's right. It has to do with race, not grace. Birthright possessions are customarily passed down from father to eldest son. So, Armstrong was claiming that the birthright was never given to the Jews as it was given to Joseph and his descendants.
And his descendants, correct. Yep.
So he's saying that wasn't the Jews. He's saying that those descendants are us,
Well, you know that
white
our
people.
mother has such like this like hatred and dismissal of the Jewish people. I think it was something to do with this book because Armstrong is saying the Jews rejected God in some way, and
Right.
it was and the white English speaking people that apparently dispersed through the British Isles and the United States. And then he started incorporating other English territories like Australia and South Africa. He's
Oh my
saying
God, it was just
that
about white
they,
people.
I know, white
What?
English speakers specifically, but he targeted that because obviously he was one of them and he needed to feel superior and he needed people to follow him. All right. And he made it seem as though this concept of British Israelism is like saying, okay, so white English speakers that live in the United States and Britain and all the like the British territories that were colonized would play into the Old Testament prophecies. That's what he was trying to get at, which has been completely disproved.
Well, part of his thing is he thought there was some Hebrew person that like went to Ireland and married an Irish princess or something, and that's how it
You
became
remember that?
white. Like what in the It's just bananas. I mean, it's like beyond mythology. I Okay. Anyway, it's just lies.
Anyway,
It's just lies. It's just manipulative fucking lies.
yep.
All right, ready. I'm gonna do the next one. Okay. A rebellious, defiant, hostile, God-hating criminal or atheist could shake his fist at God and say, "Look, God, I hate you. I defy you. I refuse to obey you." That's me saying that. But I demand your gift of eternal life. Nah, I'm good without that. It's my right. I want to be born into your divine family to receive all the vast power of a son of God so I can use that power to
Oh.
oppose you. Oh, actually, can I do that?
What?
Can I be given God's power so I can use it to oppose him?
Apparently, that's what all us atheists do, even though we don't believe in a God, yet we're talking to him, saying that we want to use it for evil.
So I can use that power to oppose you. I want to make your family a house divided against itself. I will cause friction, hostility, hatred, unhappiness among all your children. I demand that power as your gift, as my right, so that I may abuse that power, use it for evil. Okay, um, we're the ones
Thoughts?
doing that.
I know.
Because I'm sorry, but I do want to divide a house that keeps people trapped. I will. I will divide it. I will rescue. Okay.
And can I just say I love the fact that he's lumping atheists in here with evil people, where atheism is really just the concept that you're not convinced that God exists, and yet he has atheists talking directly to God and saying, "We want to use our power for evil stuff."
I don't believe in you, but give me your power.
I don't believe in you,
Oh,
but we
okay.
want to take your power away.
Yeah.
Okay. Smart. Ishmael's descendants were to become a great nation, but the birthright nations were to be greater. That is, of Isaac's descendants who had the birthright. The children of Ishmael have become the Arabs of today.
Oh,
The
I
nation and
remember.
company of nations who hold the birthright must therefore be larger, wealthier, more powerful, and must be found typically west of the Arab nations. So he narrowed down the US because of its geographical location. Like he talks a lot about the Turks in this too.
Well, and Ishmael's descendants, I remember being told that as a kid. The idea that
Yes.
like
Mm-hmm.
when there was, what is it? Isaac, Ishmael was born by Abraham, raping the handmaid. And yes, I did say that because
What?
the Handmaid's Tale comes from the whole Abraham and Sarah thing when, she's like creeping up on 100 years old or whatever. And like, oh, okay. So, because that was apparently how time worked back then, and uteruses. But so, they're like, hey, I think this maybe isn't going to work anymore. So, hey, how about you go impregnate my handmaiden? And then like the baby she has will be our baby, which is weird. But like, okay, so it's a woman. The handmaiden is there as a servant. She has no other prospects. She can't leave. And so he's going to have sex with her. That is not a consensual situation. That
Mm-hmm.
is an assault situation. I mean, even if she's compliant, because she has no choices and no voice in it, it is assault. And
Can
so
I
Abraham
ask
was a rapist, and I will stand by that.
can I ask what was Margaret Atwood's like? Did she have some sort of religion? I didn't realize that's where she got her Handmaid's Tale concept from.
Oh, I mean, the whole thing is like imagining that a group of people who wanted to enact biblical living as the government did exactly that and used stories like that to justify the things they were doing. Because in the book, what's happening is they're having fewer and fewer babies are born. Like the
Mm-hmm.
fecundity of the population is plummeting. And so so it was a whole thing to make sure that the bloodlines of the important people kept going,
The
which
birthright.
is exactly what the Abraham story was when Abraham raped the handmaiden.
Yeah. Okay. Good to
Yep.
know. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's
And
good background. Yeah.
And Ishmael was the product of that. And so because he was of Abraham, he was still someone that was important then, right? Because God said he would make Abraham's descendants like the stars of the sky or whatever that was. And so
Yeah.
Ishmael played into that. But that's what I was told as a kid was Ishmael was the like Arab, the Muslim side of things.
Okay.
Because Islam is an Abrahamic religion too.
And all falling into place. Yes. It's an interesting read. Yeah. So that was the United States and Britain in Prophecy, his book.
That's
Okay.
a little truth to start your day.
Okay. So by 1946, the Radio Church of God is incorporated into the state of California, which is so funny that Armstrong made California sort of his headquarters because today, I mean, it's a state that's woke as fuck. I feel like it always has been. And you and I grew up in San Jose, California, so we have been to his headquarters there in Pasadena, California many times.
Yep.
But yeah, he moved around 1946. Before that, he was just kind of operating upon like volunteers in Eugene, Oregon. I don't know the exact reason for him moving to Pasadena, California. He may have known people there. He was affiliated on some level with the millionaire Finkbein brothers that he had met years before, but apparently he didn't know that till after the fact. So either way, he just said he moved there for business ventures. Okay. That very same year, I thought it important to note that our father was born in Wisconsin.
So
Uh,
Armstrong's a good 15 years into his swindle, even by the time our parents come into this world.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's kind of, we're trying to draw some parallels here too on how our parents got involved in it and what was going on at the times when they were growing up. So our mother was born and raised in Los Angeles area. Our father grew up in rural Wisconsin. And he eventually moved out to California for work. They're working in Cupertino, California, which is now kind of the headquarters of Apple
Mm-hmm.
is
Yeah.
right in that area where he used to work. Jump another year to 1947, and Ambassador College is founded. Yes, Armstrong
Wow.
had a 4-year liberal arts college. The church headquarters at this point did move over to Pasadena, California. I don't know what all they taught at the university. I'm assuming, Pats, had we stayed in California, you probably would have gone to school here. We
I agree. I mean, except for the whole thing fell apart before I was college age.
Right.
I don't know that Ambassador fell apart right then, but
We'll get into that. Yeah.
this is making me realize, like, I'm thinking, why, if he's doing a church, why would he do a college? And
Mhm.
some of the stuff we've read makes me realize that he had very specific thoughts about what college did, that college put too many liberal ideas into the heads of its students. And this is making me think, we'll have to look for proof of this, but it's making me think that he was like, well, shit, they keep growing up and going off and like getting too smart to be a part of this. So, what if we have a college to make sure they are lifers?
It's a very interesting
See it
theory.
lots of different ways, but kind of makes sense to me.
So it did operate for a good 50 years or so at this college. So yeah. Apparently he had some millionaire friends that he was associated with that kind of convinced him or encouraged him to open up Ambassador College. So we'll get into a
Okay.
little bit more on what
Well,
Ambassador College was.
starting a college can be a very good business venture also, because make no mistake, like we think those places of higher learning, oop, opening a jar. There you go. We think those places of higher learning are all like altruistic and, oh, we're here to do better for the world and whatever. Like, no, they're fucking not, because we live in capitalism. So literally everything is there to make money. It's required to. And that's what we all need in order to live. So that's how it
True.
works.
It's true.
So if he saw an opportunity to make money there, I also think that could play into it,
Yeah.
because that was
Speaking
his
of money,
thing. Yeah.
Speaking of money, Armstrong made a lot of it. Around this time, I don't know when the official like golden years of the Worldwide Church of God were, but again, at this point, it's still Radio Church of God.
Mm-hmm.
Herbert W. Armstrong started purchasing all these lavish mansions on what the locals called Millionaires Row in Pasadena. Patty, do you remember attending the Rose Bowl at one point? Maybe we did a couple
Not the
times.
Rose Bowl, but the Rose Parade we went to a bunch.
Rose Parade, was that held in Pasadena?
Yep.
Okay. Right, that avenue that they went down, it was called like Orange Grove Avenue. I don't know if it's still called that, but that's where the Rose Bowl parade would go.
Oh.
Armstrong started buying out all of these properties around that area because his Ambassador College was around that same location. He even bought, it wasn't until what, 1956 that he bought a place called it was the historic Hewlett C. Merritt Mansion. Really beautiful place with some beautiful gardens. The owner had died and then he purchased it and he renamed it Ambassador Hall, which will come later. But
Gotcha.
throughout these years here, so like 1947 to 1956, he was buying out property, very expensive, lavish property in Pasadena, California. And I'm not going to sit here knocking on people that make a lot of money, but again, a lot of scandal comes up around surrounding all of his tithe money and how he was making money. So,
Well, when you convince people that they get to pay 3 tithes, yeah.
oh.
Pretty sure you're doing it for the money.
All right. And another little side note, our mother was born the following year, 1948, over there in Los Angeles. I don't know how important this is, but I thought I'd mention it. In 1948, Armstrong's second son, Garner Ted, which he will play a pivotal role. He does. I have no quarrel with this dude whatsoever. It's always just been Herbert W. Armstrong, but his son did get involved for a time, so I thought I would talk about all of that.
I was curious
Yeah.
about Garner Ted because he was gone before we were involved in anything,
Right.
right? And so I
Yes, very
actually
good.
found some footage of him giving a sermon or something like that. And no shit, it sounded like Rush Limbaugh circa 1993. Right? Like like the attack on the family, traditional family values, get the women back in the kitchen, but you don't say it quite flat out because that's not socially acceptable anymore. Yeah. So if we want to know who he was, pretty sure that covers some of it.
All right, good. I have
Yeah.
not seen much on Garner Ted. And in fact, I don't really care what he was up to, but I know that in his early years, it sounded like he was not into what his father was building, this religious empire of the Worldwide Church of God. But eventually he did become convinced of it. He joined the US Navy in 1948, which I can kind of relate to. Okay, I was the second born child in our family, and once the church split apart and I was out on my own, I did end up joining the US military also for 10 years because I needed like a family somewhere where I could connect with people.
Mhm.
So I want to say, like, I feel like I could relate with Garner Ted maybe at this point that he just wanted a place to belong. He didn't believe in all this religious bullshit. Whether or not he was eventually convinced of it, I don't know. I think he was more or less in it kind of because he was enjoying the publicity of it. Girls flew their titties at him. He was a much better looking dude than his father was. Nobody wanted to see Herbert's crusty old ass. They wanted to see Ted Armstrong on there. All right. And he was so charismatic and he was better looking and he talked so eloquently.
Yep.
People related to him. Again, there's a lot of scandal surrounding him, which whatever, he can do whatever he wants. I don't
Well,
give a fuck.
also, can we point out that he was like never gonna do it, and then he had to face like, oh, I have to go and like work for a living and like figure out the world by myself. Oh shit, that sounds like too much work. Dad?
These dates here, 1952 to about 1990. This is not an event per se in the timeline. It is simply a list that I thought was worth mentioning. The Worldwide Church of God had very much like a corporate hierarchy. Okay. You have Herbert W. Armstrong as the apostle of God. Okay. He is the pastor general of Worldwide Church of God. Again, it's not named this yet, but he was on the top. And then on the second tier, he had his evangelists. From what I could discover, there was about 44 God ordained evangelists in the Worldwide Church of God. And that was up until like 1990.
So that was
Some
a
of them
title,
stand
though,
out.
right? Because we know that the Worldwide Church of God wasn't very evangelistic in the sense that they weren't like going out necessarily and being like, join us. Jesus loves you. Jesus is for everyone.
More
So,
in the beginning, it
yeah.
was.
Oh, okay. Oh,
In
I
the
guess that makes
beginning,
sense.
I feel like it was their title was evangelists. So they were ministers ordained by God. And beyond that, like the third down in line was apparently the prophet. Some evangelists in the Worldwide Church of God became more famous than others. So I didn't have time to like mention all of them, but I thought it was worth mentioning that during this time period, Armstrong started to get his little following or minions, as they call them, to kind of spread his message. Okay. A lot of these guys were either excommunicated or they left willingly, or just the church split apart in the 90s and then they ended up creating their own splinter churches. Okay.
Right. So are you
Does that make
saying
sense?
though that like, so basically, even though there's, thousands upon thousands of believers in this organization, he's got like a core group that's like him and then his evangelists and the
Mhm.
like apostle, then his evangelists and then the prophets. And so like that was sort of his like trusted cluster. Is that
Right.
okay?
Mhm.
Okay.
All these men had their fingers up Armstrong's asshole. If I were to describe, I don't know how
Sure,
else
it
to
wasn't the whole
describe
fist.
it. It could have been the whole fist. Yes.
Okay.
But let's just say Armstrong started to get so much of a following that that was a big piece of pie. And a lot of people
Oh, I bet there were
wanted
bonuses at that level.
that piece. Yeah.
He did run it very corporate-y. Even Mr. Difficult points out in his videos that the standard clothing to wear to church, at least in the 80s or by the 80s, was like business casual, well, I guess for men it was suits, but it was business attire. It wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't fancy in other ways. It was very businessy.
He
So he maybe
keep
like
in
had
mind,
that
Patty,
going. Yeah.
keep in mind he was a failed businessman.
Oh, I'll
And the
keep that
only
in
way
mind.
he knew how to run a business was to create this religious empire. And he did run it very corporate. All right.
You know what? I'm gonna definitely keep that in mind. I'm just gonna like every time I think Herbert W. Armstrong, I'm gonna think failure. I'm gonna just marry those two ideas together. How about that?
All right. So moving on. Next spot here. We are into 1952. We are still in the 50s. We are not even going to touch on the 70s in this episode because there's so much that happens there. But I don't know if this was Armstrong's first book or if this was just sort of a booklet that he came up with. He wrote a lot of publications. It was called Does God Heal Today? This is the book where he talks about his divine healing through prayer. Okay. One of his major teachings that I don't think changed throughout his career. He taught that drugs, medicine, and knives of doctors are all idolatrous and practices of the heathens, and that if you actually get a sickness, it's because of sin. So if, say, we got COVID, that was because of some sin that we
So what did our parents when they went to the feast during the height of fucking COVID and they all got COVID? What how do they contextualize that now? How
because they
did our
sinned
mother
somewhere.
contextualize it when she had to have cesarean sections for all of her babies? Like that's a knife of a doctor. I mean, apparently that's
Right.
idolatry.
Oh my fucking.
I mean,
We'll
it's
talk about that.
they
Yes,
say
we'll
these
talk
things
about
to
that.
get people in line and then it's not ugh. Okay.
Right.
Anyway.
Right. So we're going to cover the world tomorrow. All of a sudden, Armstrong had this expand into Radio Luxembourg, and then it went into Europe. It went into other countries around the world. Now, how did Armstrong get this name? I am going to jump back here to the 1939 World's Fair. You know what that was titled? The one that took place in New York City? It was called The World of Tomorrow. I shit you not, Patty. A lot of people say that
Oh,
Armstrong's
he thought
World
of
Tomorrow
nothing
program,
on his own. He thought of nothing on his own.
that's what I'm telling you. He plagiarized, he appropriated, he came up with nothing, Patty, because he wasn't creative. He could not come up with any business venture on his own. He had to
He
use the
just knew
Bible
how to
and
make
other
people
people's
believe
work.
stuff.
Exactly.
He
Yes.
was a swindler. He was only a con man. He was only a con man. He was only a con man.
It's saturated into the culture like a bad virus. It grew like crazy from like about 1953 onwards because all of a sudden he would eventually change the name of his program or the name of his church to Worldwide Church of God because it reached so many different countries, which he was very proud about. Um, that same year, when it went over into Europe and other countries, he even got on ABC television network. And so he's on top of like the early beginnings of television and recording audio visual. He's getting his message out, Patty.
I really dislike that he was able to be at the forefront of that technology coming into its own
I know.
and be able to like exploit it and use it. I mean, it's so much like how the fact that scrolls were switching to codices at the time that the, you know, what would become Bible scriptures was being put out there. And so the technology drove it forward. I usually love technology, but damn it.
Sometimes people use things for evil, and that's just something we have to accept.
That's really it, right? Everything could be used for good or evil. And then there's Rule 34, which states that anything that exists in reality or conceptually, there will be pornographic depictions of it. So, I mean, you have good, you have evil, you have porn of it. That is just a fact.
Beautiful. That was heartwarming to
Oh,
the
oh,
soul. If we
heartwarming.
had souls. Okay, so we are going to jump ahead a couple years here to 1955. Garner Ted again. He became an ordained minister into the Worldwide Church of God ministry. I think at this point he was still kind of disinterested in the whole thing. But guess what his father did? This is so this is very much an abusive tactic, but Garner Ted apparently explained to his father, hey, I'm just not interested in this. This is not the role that I want to play in my life. His father told him that his opposition
Mhm.
alone in wanting to join this organization was a sign from God that he should actually do it. So he guilted his son into becoming an international figure into the Worldwide Church of God.
By telling him that God had told him he needed to do it.
He said it
Okay.
was a sign from God that your
Okay.
strong opposition to it. Okay.
I'm sorry.
I,
This is a public service announcement. If anyone, and I mean anyone, tells you that they have a message for you from a deity that requires you to go do something, especially something you weren't already going to do, they are bullshitting you, and you should run far and fast. That's all I had to say. God, that
it's
makes me mad.
why are we getting
I'm getting so
it's so
steamed today.
it's so hard and yes. It's so hard not to get heated over this part of the timeline here because as we read through things, I didn't even realize how many dots I would connect. Again, we're only getting like maybe 1% of the whole picture here, but hey, it's a start. I am not really going to get into like Herbert W. Armstrong's grandkids and all that because
They
it
don't deserve any of that.
it doesn't really matter. It was not their choice to kind of be born into this, I want to say, clusterfuck of a situation where there were hundreds, if not thousands, of people involved and affected by Herbert W. Armstrong's teachings. You know, they didn't ask for that. And some might even still be involved with the church, and maybe not even by their choice, or maybe they don't even know that they have a choice.
That is it
So,
exactly. It's the people don't realize they have a choice. They don't even think, do I have a choice? And that's what early conditioning does.
1953, around the time when Garner Ted Armstrong got married, that same year, The World Tomorrow was first broadcast on ABC television network. So keep in the back of our minds here, the program, the church, Herbert W. Armstrong's religious empire is just growing at an unprecedented rate. Okay. Garner Ted Armstrong does become an ordained evangelist for Worldwide Church of God. And he took over a lot of like the broadcasting responsibilities. So it was always his face for a while that you saw, as well as like he traveled South America quite a bit, doing his evangelizing. For some reason, he was fluent in Spanish. I don't know how that came about. Maybe he just learned it as a kid, but he ended up doing a lot of the programs in Spanish to reach out to a wider audience.
If you
Okay.
grew up in California, it's pretty much bilingual there.
1956 brings us the most controversial book that Herbert W. Armstrong ever wrote. 1975 in Prophecy. It was released during his, big expansion into Europe of his program. And he scared the shit out of people. He literally scared the shit out of people by saying things like the year 1972 also plays into this, but he's basically saying that his people will be brought to a place of safety during the Great Tribulation. Okay, 1975 is going to bring about things like a third of the population is going to die to things like starvation and famine and disease. So obviously 1975 came and went. The prophecy that Armstrong came up with did not take place. And I think a lot of people ended up leaving the church at this point because they realized, hey, Armstrong's prophecies were not coming true. And can
Thus,
I
he is
just
a false prophet because that's what they always
exact?
talked about. You can tell if they're true, if their prophecies come true. Hello.
But a lot of people did not leave. And can I just kind of throw out a few fun facts here of what did actually happen in the year 1975?
Yeah, do it.
We have Wheel of Fortune made its debut that year.
Whoa.
Microsoft was founded and Jimmy Hoffa disappeared. Okay. Now, Armstrong he mentions a few horrible things that were supposed to happen in 1975. Now, given this is an entire year, right? there are going to be things that happen in an entire year that you would normally see. Like, okay, Lyme disease came up with its first diagnosis in 1975. The Vietnam War was taking place, but it did also end that year. The civil war in Lebanon did begin that year, as well as the Cambodian genocide, which I know a lot of people died from that. But again, it can't correlate with the level of destruction that Armstrong was talking about with the
No.
mass burials.
You
a
could
third
pick
of the population dying.
you could pick any year and come up with
Any
a list
year.
to be like, ooh, ooh, ooh.
Right.
And that's what he did.
In
He
a
was
whole
late
year,
on
you
that.
have things like natural disasters and typhoons. I know Typhoon Nina also happened that year near China. There was like 230,000 people that died. But again, it's not on that level that Armstrong was talking about.
No.
You can make predictions, you can make prophecies about the future, and some might come close, even if they're spot on. Hey, that's a really good guess, people. Come on.
Right.
So,
Well, and you were saying something earlier about he wrote what was it, 1968 he wrote the book and it's about 1975. They were mid-trib, meaning that they thought the tribulation would start and it's a 7-year tribulation, and at the halfway point, so 3.5 years in, is when the true church would be taken to a place of safety, which I never heard what place that was stated, but apparently somewhere Petra, something like that in the Middle East was the place.
Petra Jordan. So if you've ever watched
Sure.
that third film, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, they do go into that sort of temple to look for the cup of
Oh,
Christ. That's Petra Jordan. Yeah. I don't know
oh.
how Armstrong got the idea that Petra Jordan was going to be the place of safety for his true people.
I'm
God's
sure
true.
he
I
made
don't
up
know.
something out of the book, took a couple words and put them together. Thanks for joining Nancy and I for another episode of the Apostate Sisters. Be sure to come back for our next episode where we'll continue the Herbert W. Armstrong timeline. And like, comment, and subscribe here on YouTube and also on Instagram to continue this conversation.
Yay!
Looks.